Iron Gate Dam. It smells.
Unbelievable. Look at the color.
Stop. Please cease and desist. You are actually hurting us.
As with any big project, there's often conflict and confusion.
It's almost like cultural genocide. The water quality issues that dams create.
It's a new day and it's a new era for California tribes.
And in the case for the largest dam removal project in the world,
drawdown has officially begun for COPCO 1.
The conflict and confusion played out on social media, creating deep division. In January of 2024, demolition crews blasted holes in the side of 2 of the 4 dams scheduled for removal.
We're over a week into this and we got, looks like black motor oil.
The smell of rotting fish is incredible here.
That's 8 dead deer.
As the reservoirs drained, a rush of brown sediment was sent down the Klamath. On one side, the blasts were a monumental moment for environmentalists and indigenous tribes like the Yurok, who have been fighting for over 20 years to bring down the 4 dams on the Klamath and open up more than 400 miles of fish habitat.
It happened because there was really strong leadership at the Yurok tribe that demanded a seat at the table in every aspect of this project.
But downriver of the blast in Wairika,
we may never have salmon in the river again.
That anger played out on social media.
This is a self-inflicted gunshot wound courtesy of gangrene.
And then turned into outright shouting and demands at City Hall.
With all due respect, it's time to take action, sir.
Declare a state of emergency.
It's time to take action.
In a series of meetings, residents along the Klamath River pushed their local elected leaders to file a state of emergency with the governor.
They purposely have made a disaster, now leaving the locals to figure out how to clean up their mess.
This anger and tension felt by residents along the Klamath River is nothing new. For over 2 decades now, residents and farmers have been protesting the removal of the dams. And when protesting didn't work, some even filed lawsuits against government regulators.
We can't get past the first tier of the legal process because they throw it out on technicalities.
Despite local disapproval, deconstruction of the dams moved forward. And as the water turned darker, so did the emotions.
It isn't that we haven't been heard. They've heard us. They've just flat out ignored us. And ran right over the top of us.
A lot of folks didn't think we'd ever get dam removal over the finish line, and now it's happening, and we're in a super visual stage.
Ren Brownell is a spokesperson with the Klamath River Renewal Corporation, or KRRC, the independent nonprofit put in charge by lawmakers to remove the dams and restore the land along the Klamath.
We're seeing a lot of these sediments travel downstream, and while water quality has really improved now, back in January, we did see some fish mortality. So a small amount in the main stem, which was expected, honestly a lot less than what was projected by agencies. And then also what was expected is that all of the non-native fish that lived in the reservoir, they died.
The KRRC is made up of about 15 board members and about 6 staff members. Along with managing the world's largest dam removal project, it's the KRRC's job to respond to local residents' concerns.
And I think a challenge in a rural area is how to get communications out to folks. And so we do Facebook because that's the most popular social media in rural areas, and then we send out a lot of letters.
KRRC won't respond to anything.
If you ask Jim and Linda Leach, getting a response from the KRRC is one of the biggest complaints by many in this rural community. The corporation has no local offices for residents to walk into.
They say to email them or to call them, and you do, and they don't get back to you.
Putting communication issues aside, it's taken government regulators and legislators more than 20 years to research and approve a plan to remove the 4 dams on the Klamath River. But during those 20 years of planning, Ren says many locals have become skeptical of the project.
Misinformation and conspiracy theories have always been surrounding the dam removal project.
At a small print shop in Wairika, Jay Martin reviews the latest edition of Siskiyou News.
Siskiyou News started out as an online platform, Facebook-based, for about 13 years, and it kept growing, and it got to the point where we need to go back to a physical print.
The former truck driver publishes, prints, and hand delivers a 4 to 5 page paper every week. He says his county is in sort of a news desert. The mainstream media rarely gives his community a voice.
Covering the dam removal has been hard. I'm not on their team.
The team that Jay is talking about is the KRRC. He and many of the paper's volunteer writers are against the dam removals.
As a news source, I just want to say this is the facts.
If you read through the Siskiyou News, you'll rarely see interviews from the KRRC. That's partly because the KRRC has accused them of printing misinformation.
Have you invited them out?
I have not invited them out, not since they made it very clear to me that they were going to publish misinformation no matter what. And they've never asked either, so.
Here's your weekly paper for you to look at and then put a stamp on it and give it to the board's box, please.
Jay says he stands by his paper's reporting. However, he admits that some social media sites have also flagged or censored some of his content as misinformation.
It's content related. It seems to be...
Do you think that content is what's causing you to be censored on the internet?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the paper's contributors who writes about the dams is William Simpson, a wild horse advocate who manages a herd of wild horses right above the Iron Gate Dam.
That's why I'm very concerned about the ecology of the Klamath River. You know, if we have toxins in the river, I have to wonder what's that going to do to these horses, and they're such a precious species.
The toxins that William is worried about are heavy metals in the sediments that build up behind the dam. Now, heavy metals do flow down the river naturally, but William says that high concentration of those metals have piled up in the reservoirs over 60 years.
We're talking about lead, chromium, cadmium, aluminum.
William writes extensively about research on metals and sediment quality behind the dams. In one article, William writes about corrupt science and eco-terrorism. He believes that supporters of the dam removals are ignoring past research on sediment analysis.
Even with low doses over time, it poses a real problem for all the people, including the indigenous people downriver.
This is what a lot of residents are seeing. They're a little concerned that you're dumping in the water here.
Sure.
Yeah, this is a part of the plan?
This is part of the plan, and there's nothing to be concerned about.
Dave Kaufman is with Restoration Environmental Solutions, or RES, the contractor hired to repair and replant the barren landscape where the reservoirs once were.
We guarantee restoration success on this project. And what that means is we will be here for a minimum of 5 years after the restoration activity is done, whether it's planting in an upland or doing stream restoration.
Dave says the sediment they're dumping into the water is part of a stream restoration project, and putting it into the river is actually beneficial.
Decades of testing, hundreds if not thousands of samples, multiple federal agencies, multiple presidential administrations, and eventually the states of Oregon and California, which are two of the most environmentally protective states in the country, all said, this sediment's great, send it down the river.
There are fish dead in the river.
Fear of the reservoir's sediment started with images of dead fish and stranded wildlife. William Simpson shot this drone video days after the drawdown, and it went viral on the internet. The KRRC says the one-time fish die-off was expected, and it was because the reservoir fish were non-native and couldn't survive in the Klamath River.
Guy throwing dead fish back into the river. You know this company right here, RES, that company.
But as more dead fish images and skepticism about the sediment spread across social media, residents ultimately pushed Siskiyou County supervisors to pay for an independent water test of the river.
So 3 weeks later, the day that you released those tests, my doctor called me and said, "Can you bring your sons in so we could get their heavy metal test run?"
To be clear, the Klamath River is not a source of public drinking water, but when Siskiyou County released the results from their independent water test, they reported levels of heavy metals like aluminum, chromium, and lead to be over the county's standard drinking water limits. The heavy metal scares have caused many residents along the Klamath River to also conduct their own water testing.
This is a lot darker than it was yesterday.
Linda Leach and her husband Jim have mason jars of Klamath River water dating back to January. Every day, Linda posts pictures of the water's temperature and clarity on the Facebook group Klamath River and Dam Removals Group, which attracts the attention of thousands of followers.
I mean, you've got dozens of these jars here. What do you plan on doing with these?
I don't know. I do not have a plan. I thought I should just save them, and then eventually I guess I'll quit.
If you ask Jim, he fears that the river water could somehow make it into nearby wells.
But the sludge is sitting there, and it's hydraulicing, and it's pushing into our soil, and eventually it's going to be in our well.
Even during its worst conditions, the water in the river was still always safe to touch.
The KRRC doesn't deny that trace amounts of metals were found in the county's water tests, but they say those trace amounts of metals are only temporary.
We never questioned Siskiyou County's results, right? They were done by qualified water quality technicians and they were sent to a reputable lab. It was more so the interpretation of those results.
Interpreting heavy metal water samples is extremely complex.
One thing we should be careful about when reading this data from the raw water is, this is data from the raw water. This is not the data from the water you drink.
That's why we took Siskiyou County's water test results to water treatment specialist and Sacramento State Assistant Professor Tongren Ju.
So when you had the drawdown, it's very likely your fresh water comes in, so the sediments, I made my fresh water, some of them get released out. And probably that's the reason why you see an elevated concentration of some of the heavy metals.
Assistant Professor Ju says that the elevated levels of heavy metals is likely temporary, and though it doesn't meet drinking water standards, that doesn't mean it's not safe to swim in the Klamath River. Ju also says that 1 or 2 water tests is not enough.
Over time, maybe, we don't really know how fast those sediments, those heavy metals release from the sediments. So probably we should keep monitoring for a few more months or maybe a few more years to see how that number turns out to be eventually.
Continual data collection is exactly what government regulators, the KRRC, and Siskiyou County are doing. Current water quality data shows clarity and contaminations in the Klamath River have significantly improved, but long-term data is still needed to truly interpret the health of the river. To keep all that buildup of sediment from constantly muddying up the river water, a massive revegetation effort is underway.
You know, tribal members have been fighting for their right, for their sovereignty to be on this river and to practice their cultural rights. And so yeah, it's pretty special to be here now.
Richard Green is one of the many indigenous tribal workers hired to make their way through the acres of mud and muck to replant native trees and shrubs. Involving local tribes was not only part of the dam removals agreement, but it's also an important part in reshaping and restoring the barren banks on the Klamath River.
These seeds were collected out of the Ashland area, and then the white oaks were all collected in this area in the Iron Gate Reservoir.
We visited Richard and his crew in March of 2024. Just a few months later, those seeds that they were planting started to grow. Resource Environmental Solutions, or RES, took these before and after pictures documenting the regrowth.
Doing the restoration is important, but who does the restoration is just as important.
Removing the dams on the Klamath River has been a decades-long battle fought largely by indigenous tribes like the Yurok, the Karuk, and the Shasta Nation.
Dam removal is just the beginning, right? We remove the dams and then there will be 10 years of restoration projects happening along the whole entire river throughout the whole basin.
Amy Bowers-Cordales is legal counsel with the Yurok tribe and a board member of the KRRC. It's her mission to make sure that Indigenous people remain involved in the dam removal, and that the involvement not only includes restoring the land, but restoring relationships with locals.
I want to believe that when the river heals itself, that we as humans will also feel that healing.
With any big project, there's often conflict and confusion, but in the case of the world's largest dam removal project, we really don't know how the river will respond until after the dams are completely removed. Coming up in part 3.
If you look there, you can see all of the green right there.
As we continue to follow the removal of the dams this fall, we'll take a look at the restoration efforts once the dams are completely removed.
We're at Ishy Fishy Falls, down here dip netting.
We'll also take a look at the fall salmon run as the fish make their way up the newly freed Klamath River.